episode of the Doomloop Dispatch, a new show that covers the worst parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. My name is Kevin Jones, and with me whenever possible is...
G. Scott Miller.
That's right, and I can talk, I promise. With us today is... tenants' right attorney and former San Francisco supervisor Dean Preston. We are so excited to have you on, buddy. The first Democratic Socialist to be a supervisor in 40 years, and hopefully there's more coming. We have Jackie filled up there now, but you were the guy who kicked down the door. That's right. And it's so great too. You're coming on right before too. You have an event you're helping put on, the Internet Live, which we will be ribbing the San Francisco Bay Area. Like, there's going to be lots of people impersonating people. I might be making an appearance. I don't know.
I heard about that. Yeah, I'm excited to see what you do on stage.
I know. I'm working on my jokes now. But anyways, how are you feeling, Dean? And especially, okay, this week we have a battle going on between the real estate billionaires. You have Mark Benioff versus Ron Conway, as Trump threatens to send the National Guard in. Now, how do you feel about this, especially when it definitely seems like their whole doom loop narrative that they created to push people like you out and gain power, this has come to bite them in the ass?
Yeah, it's an interesting time to be on the Doomloop Dispatch show, because it's fascinating, right? I mean, we had years of the Doom Loop, which I know you guys spend a lot of time sort of taking apart and looking at, but it was like the Doom Loop was this very convenient narrative, right, to try to blame progressives or anyone on the left for any problems, whether they were real or not, right? Yeah. So they manufacture that whole thing. And then, what's fascinating is, like, once they get control of City Hall, which now, the conservative folks and the billionaires have, suddenly we're supposed to think there's no doom loop anymore, right? It's it's like everything's great and the mayor's out there and celebrating, some small business that's opening up, and isn't it great? Like, the doom loop is gone. And, but then there's like actual inconvenient facts, right? I wrote a piece that was in Current Affairs, published in Current Affairs this week, that is about how we're actually experiencing some real doom loop stuff, right? It's like the rents are going through the roof, evictions are high, the jail population, which was, there had been reforms, it was lower, now it's up, like 1,300 people every day. I mean, it's, it's kind of a disaster for working class people and low income people in San Francisco right now. So there's actually like a real doom loop happening. These guys locally won't cover it. Then along comes, Trump and Benioff, and they're still like pounding the old doom loop narrative, right? The crime's out of control when crime is at historic lows, and just all. So it's just there's a lot going on in terms of the narratives about San Francisco, and you're really glad to be on your show talking about it today, because it feels like you guys are at the epicenter of all these conversations around.
Sadly, sometimes, yes. Sadly, sometimes. How about like this 180 that Lurie, Jenkins, and who else? Oh, and Weiner. Like, Weiner didn't really do a 180, but Jenkins and Lurie going out and saying they don't want Trump to come in. And then you have Richie Greenberg over there at California GOP, and he's begging for them to come in. But these guys were kind of aligned just a couple of months ago. I mean, how do you feel about that 180 that they did?
Yeah, they do a split. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been very critical of the mayor and other officials that have just been totally silent around Trump and authoritarianism and fascism in this country. And so, the Chronicle tried to give the mayor lots of credit and be like, this is a big strategic move. The mayor's like playing this chess game, I mean, that's such a stretch. It's it's done nothing, right? To the extent it's a strategy, it's a bad one, because it's not like they're going to leave San Francisco alone. But, look, I'm glad that they finally broke their silence a little bit, right? I think it was good. I've been a big critic of the DA, critic of the mayor, but I also, recognize that it's a positive step that they said something. but it's pretty weak what they said, and they're still, it's not like they're doing what like Brandon Johnson in Chicago is doing, which is like calling out the administration, calling this what it is. Instead, they're basically saying like, don't send your troops in. We're doing all this stuff to control crime. Right? They're not saying you're lying about San Francisco. They're not saying that a military invasion of a city is like unconscionable, illegal. If you do it, we will sue you. We will direct our police officers to confront your military. Like they're not doing any of those kind of things. They're not even saying we'll protect protesters, encouraging people to protest. Like there are 100 things they could be doing to actually stand up to this administration. So they're not doing that.
It's all formative. It's all performative.
Yeah, I mean, better than nothing. Look, I mean, at this point, there hasn't even been the performative stuff, right? So I'll take it. Like, I'm glad to see Jenkins in response to Mark Benioff being like, no, actually shouldn't send troops to San Francisco, right? It's just so absurd, right? So it's ludicrous that it takes so much for them to make that really, really basic statement. But at least they've done that. But it's like, what's next, right? I mean, what are they going to do when there actually are troops deployed to San Francisco? When ICE ramps up its kidnappings of people? Like, what are the elected officials going to do when they ramp up their abuse of protesters, right? Because so far they've absolutely failed on that front. And just one example of like the difference, right, is I think you've talked about in previous shows around what happened to when the ICE agents like drove the car into protesters. Right. Yeah. Down at, people were protesting. So they literally on film drove a vehicle into peaceful protesters. Right. Not a word from the mayor, not a word from the district attorney. And the only thing the police department said when Mission Local asked them about it was that San Francisco Police Department would protect ICE agents. Right. So you compare that to like go halfway across the country, right, to, Broadview, Illinois, near Chicago. Right there. Similar thing happened. You know what the mayor did? I mean, there was a press conference, right? The mayor and mayors from other cities and the police department announcing 3 criminal investigations of ICE agents, 2 of them for using a vehicle to ram into peaceful protesters, right? So they're being criminally investigated there, with the mayor and police department being like, no, you're not going to do this to people, right, in our community. So they're not perfect over there, but it just shows you, like, here, complete silence, don't even acknowledge the incident. There you actually have a prosecution likely to happen of those agents. So we got to do more of that here, right? We got to actually have our leaders not just issuing a tweet or a sentence saying crime's under control, but actually taking on this administration.
Yeah, because especially, I mean, but then also that would be surprising. That would not be like them. Like Jenkins famously, when she came into office replacing Boudin, basically all the cases against bad cops who had killed people, shot people, she shoved them all under the rug, just passed them on. So it's like, even if she would make that effort to do something, would we see anything? I doubt it. I have no belief in her.
Well, and she's prosecuting,
protesters,
right? The Golden Gate 26. I mean, she is a year later, right? Over a year. It's like a year and a half later. These people, their lives are still upside down, right? It takes a toll on them, right? They're being prosecuted for a protest act of civil disobedience, against the genocide in Gaza, right? And so there she's like all action, right? I mean, she's charging them not just with misdemeanors and stuff, she's charging them with felonies, and she's bringing a unprecedented claim for restitution, $160,000 or more than that, $160-something thousand in restitution to the Golden Gate Bridge Authority for like lost revenue. I mean, they never do this. The bridges have been shut down. Like they never prosecute protesters for that, right? So her office is like doing this unprecedented level of crackdown on protesters, and then not doing anything when ICE agents ram a car into a protester, right? It's just, it's completely outrageous. But I agree, Kevin, it's probably not the most surprising, given how her office has been so far.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, dang it. And these are why we support government. We need our protectors, our guardians, and we're not going to see that. Especially, and I would not be surprised to see more ICE violence against innocent people. Like there's just that footage out of LA where the guy is following ICE, and then one of the ICE cars comes and crashes into it. I mean, that's retribution, and that's something to be really worried about. But
I would say a lot of these, politicians are careerists, and if there's enough pressure, some of them will speak out. That's what we're seeing now, right? I mean, Lurie's been criticized quite a bit for his silence, and so, and Jenkins as well. And so seeing the Benioff encouraging Trump, and then Trump naming San Francisco. I mean, I think they realize that they've been able to kind of stick their head in the sand on this one, and people have been critical of them, especially the mayor, for not speaking up. And so I think you're seeing some crack in that. And I do think if people are, demanding of it enough, they're going to have to do something. Now, maybe more performative stuff. Are they really going to get in the way of federal assault on San Francisco or not? We'll see. But I do think the pressure has some impact on whether they feel like they have to say something.
Well, I mean, how much of it do you think is actually like this long-going compromise that we've made with the right-leaning forces of San Francisco? I mean, like as far as we know that some forces, like we know some voices in tech, some money in tech, they've been trying to push San Francisco right for a long time. And so now that these people are having to really confront the fact that this is what they were inviting through this kind of like ideological shift that they were doing. How much do you think is actually just this thing about like kind of like political compromise? Like they don't want to step on the wrong toes on the right, but they don't have any problem doing the same things that people on the left. Like, so how would they balance that? How do you think they would balance that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and it's not like there's a pure sort of Democrat Republican split on these issues, and that Trump represents one side and local corporate Dems or conservative Dems represent another side. Like on some issues, they're totally aligned, right? Like I don't know. I think half our elected officials, if they could be guaranteed that Trump's National Guard came in and all they did was arrest a bunch of people who were addicted to drugs or who were homeless, and then they got the hell and declared victory and left, I think half our elected officials in San Francisco would be thrilled, right? Like, so, I mean, the Trump executive order on homelessness and mental illness and behavioral health could have been written by Mayor Lurie and half the board of supervisors, right? And Gavin Newsom. I mean, it's the same thing, right? And so I think some of the things that we all might find really objectionable with a militarized intervention, I think the folks in power in San Francisco have been laying the groundwork for that for years, right? Normalize. I mean, look, you have like in 2023, Matt Dorsey tweeted, "The cavalry is coming," when Gavin Newsom sent the National Guard into San Francisco.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. I mean, but now he's tweeting about how terrible it would be for Trump to send the National Guard to San Francisco. Right. So there is this, this groundwork of like what London Breed, the conservative members, more conservative, they call themselves moderate members of the board, and other leaders have been the drum they've been beating for years, right? With full tech billionaire support of like San Francisco is this dystopian hellhole, and we just got to come in and clean up the streets, and we've been too compassionate for too long. We got to get all that stuff. Certainly, it's like lays the groundwork for people to actually believe these attacks on San Francisco, right? And think that, what we need is a more militaristic response to it. So I think I don't know if there's, actual agreements and conversations. I have no idea. I have no idea if Mayor Lurie's team is, since Trump got elected, has talked to Trump's team or not, whether there are any agreements or not. Like I don't want to suggest that there is. There may be zero communication, but they're playing in some ways from a similar playbook on certain issues, especially homelessness, hyping up crime. I mean, Lurie ran for office. Public safety was his biggest thing. It was all about crime, crime, crime at a time when we had historically low crime rates.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Sound familiar?
Yeah.
So it's not like you can all of a sudden try to say, oh no, everything's under control, but you don't have a lot of credibility when you've been saying that for years. I think people do better to listen, to elected leaders like Shimon Walton and Jackie Fielder and others who have been talking truthfully about these issues for years.
Totally. And, I was listening to your interview on Dystopia Now, and you talked about how you got into politics, or at least like started running for office because you were a tenants' rights attorney. You had Tenants Together, which was your like tenants' rights organization, but you kept running into politicians, and they kept pushing you back, and that's why you were like, "Dang it, I have to be a politician to really make a difference." So this is kind of a two-parter. First off, as the progressive member of the board of supervisors, which there always seems to be at least like one, but they also seem like a punching bag. Like, did you see how, like, did it really make a difference being in that position? And then I'll ask my second question.
Yeah, I think it definitely made a difference, especially, I got into office 3 months before the city basically shut down for COVID. And we were able to move some pretty major policy reforms and emergency measures, banning evictions. We ran Prop I to raise, to tax high-end real estate sales, raising hundreds of millions of dollars. We launched the biggest local rent relief program in U.S. history here in San Francisco. It stopped 20,000 people. And that's what we can document. 20,000 people didn't lose their homes because of it. So it's like, and there's all kinds of stuff we did, especially in the pandemic, that I think had a huge impact. We also had a more progressive, friendly board, even though there was tension with the mayor, like generally speaking, on tenant rights, worker rights, those kind of things. We were able to move some pretty significant policies and deliver law for our district. So, I think there's actually quite a bit that one elected official can do. Sometimes it's in winning a fight and adopting a policy. Sometimes it's just holding the line. I mean, you see in San Francisco, this creep toward the right, and the normalizing things that used to be what Republicans say now are just what Democrats say, and especially around public safety, policing, just homelessness, and just like we've taken so many steps backwards from a national conversation that was happening in 2020, and a real civil rights movement of our era that was like actually building and breaking into some of the spaces that usually aren't paying attention to police abuse and racism, and so I think that there is, especially toward the end of my time in office, on things like public safety and police budgets, for example, I felt like I was holding the line more than winning a battle. Right. So we would, do an audit of the police department, show how they were wasting so much money on overtime, put up a fight in the budget process, put a spotlight on that, but not necessarily have the votes, right, to stop the police department from getting another 50 million that year or another 100 million that year. But I still think it's really important to have those voices in elected offices, like Barbara Lee voting against the Iraq War, right? I mean, she was literally one person, but it made a statement and showed it wasn't unanimous, right? So, I think, unfortunately, given our current politics in San Francisco, more and more, I wish them the best of luck, Jackie Fielder and others, in passing legislation. But I also think, given how conservative the board is now and the mayor's office, I think often they're going to find themselves kind of holding the line and making sure that people see the rightward shift and can decide whether they like it or not.
Yeah. Same with like what Carol Fife is doing in Oakland as well. Same kind of thing. And
right.
And so another part of that I was interested in is the fact that you were really why you got into politics was your tenant work and pushing against the real estate industry. And we talked about too, and it is something that I've known too, that like the real estate is always in San Francisco, like the interests have always been the right side, and they're always kind of pushing for their things. But it seemed like they were maybe not the most affected. Maybe during Feinstein's when she was mayor, even though I think that was more Quentin Kopp. But then it seems like now, and I want to know if you agree with this, that the real estate interests are finally winning because they have this deal now with the techies. And they have that money now. Are we facing like a Voltron, like a Republican real estate Voltron right now? Is that what you're seeing, and why they're getting so much success?
Well, they certainly have had a lot of power at the state level and locally, right?
Yeah.
For many years, the real estate interests. So I started doing this work, I mean, it's 25 years ago now, and there was a certain dynamic where, for the most part, you could pass tenant-friendly things in San Francisco, right? It's it's a majority. It's still 2/3 renters. Was once even higher than that. Elected officials generally have been more friendly to positions of like the tenants union and other tenant organizers and tenant groups here. And then the state is the exact opposite. Right. So when you go to the state, most everything gets passed is whatever the landlords and developers and real estate agents, whatever they want passed. Even the tenant protection stuff gets so watered down usually that it's to a place where the industry is okay with it. Right. And so most of the problems that you see, in San Francisco around housing are because of bad state legislation. Right. So you could ban Ellis Act evictions. You could, people talk about like how to make San Francisco affordable. You got to build your way out of it. You got to, all these theories of things, rezoning that might, 10, 20 years from now lead to, nobody ever wants to talk about the most obvious thing. You could just lower the rent. Like you literally just pass a law lowering the rent. Why can't we do that? Because there's a law in Sacramento, state law, that prohibits you from doing that, right? Yeah. So, so the industry was in some sense smart, and it's not just California, like New York, other states have this dynamic where like the big city has a little more renter-friendly leadership usually, but then the big money has the power at the state level and just preempts the city from doing stronger stuff, right? And so that's the dynamic. I worked for 7 years representing tenants in the Tenderloin and around San Francisco in court. I then went and started a statewide tenant organization and dealt with this all in Sacramento, as well as trying to strengthen the network of tenants unions and groups around the state. But that's, doing that state work was when I really confronted this reality of like, you just go in and talk to a legislator and they couldn't care less. Like the most basic, obvious thing. You're like, here's a case, this senior who's lived there 30 years and is like being evicted for no reason, just because this real estate speculator from Nevada wants to come flip the place. And like you would expect a normal human reaction to be mad. And, the staff were mad and would say, yeah, we'll talk to, and they just vote against you on like anything that would protect people because they're just in the pocket of the real estate industry. And so, but I do think, Kevin's a long way to get to your question, which I think was about the local dynamics and how, like, in some ways they didn't have as much power and have gained it. Right.
Yes.
And I think what happened was, before this most recent infusion of tech money into our politics, the landlord side was not really, they didn't win a lot locally, and they would tend to win at the state level, but it wasn't like a mystery who they were and what they wanted, right? Like they want to deregulate, they don't want taxes, and they just want to make gobs of money, and they want to make it off the back support. They don't really care how it impacts working class people, right? That's just who they are, right? They're just like the pure capitalist, right? It's like no rules on me. I only want government when it's going to help me, when it is build a road to get me somewhere or whatever. But like, they don't want government involved, and they don't want taxes, and they just want unlimited profits, right?
Yeah,
that's kind of like the real.
Oh, I was gonna say this is the same industry that produced Trump, you know?
Yeah.
That's the kind of people it attracts.
Yeah, and I think what they found, certainly locally in San Francisco, is like their endorsements were kind of the kiss of death. Like no one wants to, no one wants tenants don't want like the landlord developer types, and they were kind of disliked. I think what has happened in recent years with the tech industry and the YIMBY movement and the abundance movement, all that is, I think they've realized that the model of just like advancing conservative talking points like the real estate industry did for decades doesn't win you elections in progressive cities.
Yeah.
It's like it's kind of gotten old, right? And so so they've shifted their messaging, right? They've co-opted a lot of the messaging. That's what you see with the YIMBY movement. They don't come out and say, let's just deregulate everything, no taxes on the rich, right? They don't say that stuff. They say, let's make housing affordable by like letting these developers do whatever they want, and so, so they recast themselves, and it's been fairly effective. And I'll give you an example of like how I've seen that change just in the last handful of years, right? When I ran for office, I ran in 2019 and won in a very close election. In that race, I was attacked nonstop by the real estate industry. And their messages were, I was too far left. He's a socialist. They called me Extreme Dean. They tried to scare property owners, homeowners into thinking I was going to come seize their homes, right? It was your classic, like, red baiting, like leftist, be scared of this guy. And it didn't work, and I won. A year later, I had to run for election again because I had won a special election to be in office for a year. I had to immediately run again. And they went all in. They took my record, which was, getting hotel rooms for homeless people, banning eviction, all that. They took that and again tried to smear me from the right. He's too extreme. He's giving out tents to homeless people. He's, like that was the whole thing. And these gross mailers, and it didn't work. I won in like a landslide the second time. I won by an even bigger margin. So fast forward 4 years later, when they're running against me, they didn't use any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. They didn't say he's too far left, he's too progressive, he's a socialist. None of that. It was this made up thing like he blocks housing and he's pro fentanyl overdoses and he's like, just this wacky stuff as if they're the real progressives, right? And the actual left people are actually just against any change. They totally changed their narrative and it worked, right? Well, but I think we see that again and again. They used to attack progressives from the right, and now they have a fake left, cooperative
pseudo left, the pseudo left.
Pseudo left. They find like the one thing where you voted for an amendment to this, and then they try to like make a mountain out of that, some irrelevant thing to show no, actually you're
But it's funny because like what you got me to think about when you're talking about that are these AstroTurf networks where back in the day we would call the very people that they call activists, we call them operatives. So basically I'm thinking things like Moms for Liberty. I'm thinking about the school board recall where we're dealing with these groups that are saying that they're activist groups, and all of a sudden the press is saying these are activist groups, but they're not activist groups because they're actually being paid by the tech industry and by the landlord industry to front as activists. Like you can't be an activist if you're actually on retainer. You know what I mean?
Yes, I wanted to show this. This is exactly what Dean is talking about. It's like basically the GrowSF, which again is one of these fake, no, we're from the left. We care about housing. We want to help the homeless and we want to bring rents down to bring in more immigrants. No, who cares about the immigrants in the RVs? Don't think about them. Don't talk about them. Think about the immigrants we could be bringing in. And yes, I saw this last night and I just had to share it because I think it's so funny because it's so off. It's like, saying that you've routinely blocked and opposed new housing construction. You're against home building. I didn't know that, Dean. I thought you actually wanted to house people. I thought that.
Yeah, it's so wild. I mean, it's just kind of an era of disinformation and figuring out how to rebut that. I think it's a real challenge for anyone on the left, right? It's going to be a challenge if, Mamdani wins in New York, right? They're going to come after him nonstop. And, it's one thing to actually, I think what's shifted is there used to be actual policy debates on stuff. I don't want to glorify it too much because there was all kinds of disinformation stuff. But I think when I entered office, it felt like a little more, you kind of knew what the battle lines were. And look, the tech, Ron Conway, all these folks for years were trying to win office. The Yimbys were trying to win off. They lost left and right. Like their candidates got clobbered, and the only way they could get like into any position of power in San Francisco was getting appointed. So like Sonia Traus, the founder of the Yimby movement, ran for office, got clobbered. Like voters didn't want it. And, she had to get appointed to something, right? So what finally, I think they planted a lot of seeds, developed these astroturf networks, got a lot of funding, but they also had to shift their messaging, because to win in San Francisco, you had to be perceived as being somewhat progressive for the most part, except for the mayor's office, where, that's often less the case, right? But in district races where people get to know their supervisors, that's the case. And so you do have these very strange things. I mean, I would say they're increasingly shameless about the disinformation and the smears, and this stuff works, right? It's like, so there's a strategy for really cynical folks, is that you kind of attack and smear the thing that is strong about your opponent, right? And that's kind of, it's like dating myself, but like years and years ago, it was like the John Kerry, so the opponents of John Kerry did the Swift Vote Veterans for Truth. Well, why did they do that? Because John Kerry was a war veteran, and they thought that would resonate with people. So they created this entire fake thing to smear his service because they thought that was his strength. And, so when you see like their attacks on me in this most recent election, what do they come at? They come at like my housing record, which is kind of insane. Like if you look at what I've done the last 25 years, that would be far and away the thing I've had the most positive impact on, is fighting for affordable housing funding, fighting against evictions, and, fighting for rent control. So it's like, that's the stuff they come at you on. And, I think they've shown sometimes it can work, not always. But sometimes it can work, and it doesn't hurt if you have, the Chronicle and the billionaire-owned San Francisco Standard echoing all these points all the time.
Yeah. God dang, seeing that has been crazy. I mean, especially that's why I had to leave, especially because of Heather Knight. I just had to stop writing for the Chronicle. But yeah, and I want to point out too, that big, beautiful building in the Haight right next to Amoeba, that is all you. Took over that gross McDonald's parking lot. Kudos, man. Seriously, turning that into affordable housing. That's awesome.
We green lighted and got moving so much affordable housing during the 5 years I was in office. So it was so weird to have this group like saying we're blocking housing, which is complete nonsense. It was interesting. It finally went to a judge, and they totally sided with us because we put in our in our ballot statement, as part of the background, that I'd voted to approve 30,000 units of housing, and most of it affordable. And so they literally sued us, and they got all their headlines saying, Preston lies about his housing, and a judge like sided with us completely, and all our numbers, it's all there. All my votes are public, but I'm actually very proud of our housing work, and like both in terms of the short term and stopping evictions and displacement, but also like the affordable housing. 730 Stanton is one. They just opened the Kelsey down on Grove and Van Ness, which is an amazing affordable housing. We got the state to agree to build hundreds of units of affordable housing across from on the DMV lot, and it's just like, building after building. What the tech billionaires and tech bros are pissed off about is they're not the ones prioritized, right? A lot of that housing is targeting people who are low income in San Francisco or moderate income. And if you're earning hundreds of thousands of dollars a year or millions of dollars a year, it's not, I didn't prioritize like building more mansions in Pacific Heights or something, or whatever $1
million condos.
But you're essentially saying that like one of the main causes is because they're jealous Like that's the emotion. Is just like they
Well,
feel
that's about right.
overlooked. They're just
Entitlement, right?
Yeah, they feel entitled to it. So that's the reason why they came at you, because you didn't say they were entitled to it.
I mean, I think it's part of it, right? Like, because we have, if you just let the free market go on housing, you just say, okay, go for it, right? I mean, there's two things that are just objectively true. Number one, these days and in the last 5 years, like nothing gets built. Mm-hmm. Right. It's just the private market, they can earn more speculative profits right now building somewhere else. And so they do it somewhere else. Right. So they can do all their performative rezonings and this and that. But at the end of the day, like the cost of capital is the biggest driver of whether they're going to build. And if capital's cheap and if the rents go up, then they're going to build more, right? Because then they can build it cheaper and they can sell it or rent it for more, right? It's that simple. So that's just like the facts on the building side. But the other thing is, if you let the free market go, and let's say you have the circumstances where they're going to build. Let's say you upzone everything, deregulate, say you guys don't have to build any affordable units in there, do your thing. The market cooperates, costs of capital come down, prices in San Francisco go up another 20%. These developers are like, yeah, now's the time. And they build a bunch of stuff. None of it, like literally none of it, will be affordable to anyone who isn't in the top 20% of earners, right? Like people who are, the school teacher, the janitor, the social worker, I mean, you name, they are not going to be able to buy or afford that place, right? And if they rent it, they're probably paying 50% of their income, 60% of their income, just to their rent, right? And so what happens is, if you cheer on that system, then billionaires love you, real estate billionaires love you, tech bros who want to occupy that $1.5 million condo, they're happy. They're going to be more of those condos for them, right? So it's and then when you view your role like I did, which is like, I'm elected to help make sure government works for people the private market isn't working for.
Yep.
Right. And I'm very clear on that. So it's like, it's not, I mean, I don't mind if you want to build some more condos that are only affordable to rich people. Like, I didn't make it my job to stand in the way of that. I'm just like, that's not the solution to the problem I'm trying to solve. The problem I'm trying to solve is, I got all these teachers, seniors, retail worker who can't afford to live in San Francisco, artists, musicians, right? They're all leaving the city and none are coming here. How do we change that, right? And, so when you do that and you prioritize in that way, it pisses off people who are in control and in power, right? And that's just, and that's not just on this issue, right? But it's very clear on this issue.
Yeah, right, definitely. Right. They don't want to be around the pores. They don't, they don't want to say, but also, and that's a great point too, because one of the things you did right before you left was you got that report on social housing and its possibilities in San Francisco. Can you get into what that report found? And do you see that still as a possibility in San Francisco?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just a political choice, right? And and San Francisco has done some forms of social housing. There's been amazing history of activism here, community land trusts that have launched, permanent supportive housing, things that have been taken off the market and actually repurposed for lower income people. But as a nation, basically, since Nixon, we've pretty much not invested in public housing, right? It's been, we basically have been, both parties have been like slashing funding for truly public housing. And there, if there's the will to do it, there's an opportunity to do that with, even if the federal government doesn't, to do it locally, either through local money or hopefully through state money as well. And this was the idea of why I wrote Prop I in 2020. And it was exactly for this reason, because I went to the mayor's office. I said, we got to, as a city, start building and managing like city-owned housing. We just have to do it, right? Even if it's only hundreds of units at start, not thousands, and then grow it. We got to do it, because the feds and the state, they're not coming in to like save us. It's been half a century and it's just not happening, right? And so their response was, oh, it's too expensive. And we already have our money committed to different types of housing. And I said, fine, we will go get you more money.
Yeah. And let's be clear, Prop I, what that did is increase the amount of money in taxes on transfer, real estate sales, on leases of 35 years or more. So it's just basically, if it's, and this, we're talking millionaire properties, 10 million to 25 million.
They pay your fair share and we can get this done, basically.
Yes, exactly.
Totally. And so we went out there, we did Prop I. The industry went nuts. I mean, they spent a fortune against it, and as you say, it taxed. So what it did was it doubled the tax. There's a transfer tax when someone sells something, any piece of property in San Francisco. There's a tax on it when you the moment you sell it, right? What we did is we said we're gonna double the tax on any sale that's $10 million or more. So most of that is like mega mansions, it's like Pack Heights mega mansions, $40 million, $30 million, like those would get taxed. And then all the skyscrapers downtown, right? They'll sell for like hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And so, first year it brought in, about $180 million. I mean, it's brought in the about $400 million at this point. And with projected revenue, we're nearing $500 million. So like, and then you can leverage that, right? You can, people say, oh, well, that'll only build, 500 units. And that's just not how it works. If you have a pool of $500 million to then leverage and secure through long-term debt financing and other tools, like you can take that pot of money and build a massive amount of housing, right? So, but despite passing that, and despite the Board of Supervisors unanimously saying we want this money used for social housing, the mayor just said, I'm not spending it on, the former mayor. He's like, I'm not spending it on housing. And every year we had a battle. We actually clawed back, a chunk of it, but we couldn't get what we need, which is a long-term commitment to just saying, look, the voters wanted it. The Board of Supervisors wanted it. Like, this is housing money. And we're going to commit it for that purpose and have a long-term strategy and scale up social housing in San Francisco. Lurie takes over. We had hoped he would see it, a different way. He hasn't. He's done the same thing. He's just taken that money and used it for other stuff. So, we could totally do a social housing program in San Francisco without federal or state money. We can't do it to the scale we need, but we could be creating thousands of units locally for, cross income, for, middle class, lower income, like everyone kind of in one setting, totally doable, and just requires the political will to make it happen. And we did the hard part, which is getting a lot of the revenue. I mean, that's what's so weird. It's like we literally went out.
I'm mystified. Why are the mayors against it though? Are the mayors against it because they need the money to reallocate it, or are they doing that as personal favors for their real estate buddies? I mean, what exactly do you think is the motivation for that?
I think primarily the real estate billionaires were absolutely furious that we did this tax and did it without their permission. Like, and past changes to that tax have been like 0.25% or whatever, and it brings in a lot of money. We literally doubled the tax, and we didn't ask them. We just did it. We're like, we're going to do it. So they were really, really pissed off, and they've been looking for ways to undo it. It's a tax on the wealthy, and it's the thing that they don't want to talk about, right? It's like, if these billionaires paid like a 1% tax to the city on their incomes, we wouldn't be slashing food programs and cutting affordable housing program, right? I mean, so they don't want to be taxed. And these are the folks who put our former mayor in office and who certainly have the ear of the current mayor. They don't like this tax. I think there was a personal element of it, right? The former mayor was previously supervisor for my district, and had appointed her chosen person who I defeated, and she definitely held a grudge, and so there were some dynamics around that also. But I think at the end of the day, it's just like at the end of the day, though, I think like, and it's a really important point. It's like a lot of the things that we've shown work, like the conservative interests want to oppose them because they cost money, and the voters of San Francisco are happy to tax the rich to pay for it, right? So that's what we showed with Prop I, right? I mean, like everyone, all the pundits are like, there are too many taxes, it's too big a tax, the voters are going to reject it in a pandemic. None of that was true. So we did all kinds of stuff in 2020, 2021 that involved taxing the wealthy to pay for things like hotels for homeless people, rent relief programs, all that. And that stuff was totally working. And that's what, that I see some of what happened as like a billionaire backlash, right? So the last thing the real estate billionaires want is a vibrant market for social housing, so that when you're looking for a place to live on a middle-class salary in San Francisco, you're not beholden to whatever rent they want to charge you. You could just walk into a government-owned and operated social housing like in Vienna and not have to spend your entire life paying 50-60% of your income to rent and fearing when you're going to get evicted. And you can actually just have a stable life, raise your family, do whatever, and like they don't want that, right? It's a threat to their monopoly on housing.
Yeah, and that's what kills me too, is the Yimbys always push the European model. They're always citing like Amsterdam. Don't you want to turn it into Amsterdam? Oh, you mean the most expensive city in Europe? Sure. And that's what they also don't realize, that like literally, sure, you can have renters for all their lives, but social housing is a key part of setting up that lifestyle. I mean, like if when you're old and frail, you can't work and make rent.
Well, and that's what I find so fascinating. I find fascinating that no matter what the conversation is, Yimby or NIMBY, very few people talk about public housing or social housing. Yeah. Like we're always talking about like, a market rate or making it affordable. But people need housing, and housing should be closer to a human right than a gamble. You know what I mean? So I'm heartened to hear there are at least some politicians out there that understand that we once had programs like this. They were very successful programs, and a lot of people came out healthy and whole, and were made whole through these kind of programs. So I mean, like, but nobody's talking about it. Nobody really talks about social public housing. It's kind of like been pushed out of the conversation. It's almost taboo to even say anything about it. So
yeah. Well, there's been a long-term assault on and smearing of public housing, right? And it's one of these things.
The projects.
Yeah, I mean, so this has been the standard operating procedure for the Republican Party, right? It's like you criticize a thing that's public, you defund it. It doesn't work as well because it's defunded. And then you say, well, the public thing failed, let's privatize it, right? So they do it with everything. They do it with schools, they do it with housing. And it's impossible to look at like the attack on public housing in this country and not see, the classism and racism that was so much a part of this assault on public housing while you're defunding it. Like, of course, the conditions are going to deteriorate. It's not because the people live there. It's because you're literally not funding the maintenance of their homes, And so it is important. And I agree with you that looking at and really centering models of public housing, whatever you want to call it, these are all, just different models. The social housing is, what's often different when I talk about it is locally, it's more like municipal housing, right? It's actually like the city providing it, where traditionally for us, public housing, we think of more as federally provided. But I have always been, I'm not always in a majority of this view, but I'm wide open to different models under a big umbrella of social housing. To me, the key thing is getting it off the speculative market, like making it a home that is about housing someone at affordable rates for the rest of their life if they want to be there, right? And if that comes through a community land trust, if that comes through a limited equity co-ops were big like in the 1980s, if that comes from municipal housing that the government owns, if it comes from federal public housing, if it comes from just low-income housing tax credit, like other programs, I'm much more focused on like what's the benefit for people like right now and permanently in those programs, and how and all those things I mentioned are distinct from let's just let the market, the landlord, charge whatever they want, right, and evict people whenever they want.
And I wanted, and you make a great point too, because to me, the issue with housing is not about supply; it's about commodification. If that was true, that it was about supply, Vancouver would be one of the easiest places to live, and that's just not true. And you actually did try to attack this and or at least address this issue of the commodification with the vacancy tax, because land banking is a very real thing. I mean, honestly, you will get Yimbys pushing back like, why would anyone not want to rent something out? You know, and it's like, well, because there's value in it, you know, and it could sit in a portfolio for an equity firm, you know, like literally it could just be that kind of thing. And you push through the vacancy tax, which I thought was such a great idea, but then now it's held up in court.
Right.
Does it have a chance to survive? Do you still hope your baby will be able to go out there and live?
Yeah, I think it has a very good chance to survive. It was kind of an incomprehensible lower court ruling. Instead of being assigned to like the complex litigation judges, it was assigned into like the regular housing court, where things are often decided much quicker. And it was decided with no questions, no analysis, like to throw out a city ballot measure without even a discussion with the city attorneys. I mean, it's very strange. And so I think there's a very good chance it gets overturned on appeal and reinstated. And so what that law does, so the empty homes tax, which we passed in 2022, would actually for vacancies basically lasting, you know, more than half the year, without having there's a long list of reasons why someone might legitimately have it vacant. But for people who are just like holding property off the market, it's a per unit tax. It's the strongest in the nation as far as vacancy taxes go, in part because we impose a tax per unit. So like you see, there was a building in my district, 8-unit building. It's been empty for 7 years, right? Though they would be paying at first $2,500 tax per unit per year, $5,000 the next year, $10,000 the next, and that depends on the size. And, you know, so it's significant. So suddenly you're paying a $10,000 tax per unit in your 8-unit building. Like that's a chunk of money that may make you think, is this the best thing to keep it empty? But we have, you know, over 40,000 units sitting empty in San Francisco. You know, and just for context, it's like, that's basically, it's about 10 times the number of people who are sleeping on the street. Like there's at least 10 empty homes tonight for every person who's sleeping on the street in San Francisco. So the supply discussions are, you know, there is an impact of supply. We can discuss, you know, or debate that. But in terms of like really solving, you know, homelessness and housing instability, the quickest way to do it would be either change state law and start regulating rents in a more serious way, or start filling vacant homes, or, you know, or both. And I'm hopeful they'll overturn, you know, the court ruling on vacancy tax. We were pretty, you know, careful. Then the folks who officially sponsored it were pretty careful in making sure that it, you know, was done legally. So
yeah, and I always loved it too, because did you know that was part of Jello Biafra's platform when he ran for mayor back in?
Oh, is that right? I didn't know.
Yeah, he was that old of an idea, so I love it. You know, finally you made Jello's dream come true. But I guess the other thing is like enforcing it though is the problem too, and you're seeing that in Berkeley as well. You know, it's kind of,
it's doable though. It's doable, and look, none of these things are like it's not like there's one answer, right? I mean, you have a vacancy tax, you know, and it's always so strange when people attack your ideas by saying like, that's not going to solve everything, so I don't support it. You know, it's like the Yimbys would come out and be like, you know, well, actually, it's only 3,000 units, not 40,000 units that would get back on the market. And I'm like, who cares? I don't think they're right, but even if they are, so what? If 3,000 or 2,000 units, you know, are now opened up that we're going to just be hoarded and traded like, you know, like shares of stock or something to the next buyer. Like, why is that? And if you folks are supposedly so big on housing supply, why are you not celebrating that? You know, and that's, I think, what we find so often with this real estate backed AstroTurf YIMBY movement is that it attracts a lot of folks who I think actually mean well and are trying to deal with a situation. Like they give a nice narrative. It's like, oh yeah, look at all these zoning laws or whatever that are stopping the housing. And it's a very simplified narrative that doesn't address power, doesn't address money and politics, any of that. And is just like, hey, you need a home? Let's build homes, right? So it has a certain appeal, and it draws in a lot of, folks who I think maybe not, they aren't housing experts, but they just actually want to have more options of where to live, So, but the leadership of it is so cynical, anti-progressive, and never prioritizes actual things that will help low-income and working class people. And that's my biggest objection in dealing with and being the target of that movement for so long, is when it comes to like rent control, at the state level, they won't support it. They come out against changing the state laws that preempt rent control. When it comes to like all the affordable housing work we did in the district, I mean, there's so few. Will they support an affordable housing project, one or two here or there? Sure. But overall, are they partners when it comes to like trying to build affordable housing somewhere? Absolutely not in San Francisco. Absolutely not. So this whole narrative, there's champions of like apartments in these wealthy neighborhoods and all. It's like, great. Like, go build some apartment buildings in Pacific Heights, or go build some apartment buildings in the Marina, or go build some apartment buildings in Palo Alto, right? But they're not doing that stuff. Like, they're building market rate expensive housing in gentrifying neighborhoods and vilifying anyone who stands up to them. And so I can just like example after example where like if they actually cared about what they say is their thing, like more housing, they'd be there, but they're either absent or opposing the efforts to provide housing for people who aren't privileged, right? Like, and when you do that, and the clearest example is Parcel K in Hayes Valley, right? So it is an asphalt lot in a neighborhood that was once a working class Black neighborhood and has been totally gentrified, right? Over the years, totally gentrified, displaced most of the Black community there. But decades ago, there was this parcel of land that was originally part of the freeway. It was deeded over to the city on the condition, and the deal was they were going to build affordable housing there, right? It sits empty. It's been empty for 20 years. When I was in office, we made as a priority, we're going to build the affordable housing here for low-income families. Could house about 100 families there. And it's an asphalt lot that is owned by the city and dedicated for affordable housing, right? You would think the YIMBYs would be right there with us, right? If they meant what they said about building housing. Oh, no. Like, head of, former staffer for GrowSF, prominent YIMBY in the neighborhood, was complaining that it's going to cast shadows on a nearby park. They're upset they're going to lose the outdoor private gym that operates there, right? Like literally like fighting against us, trying to get affordable housing and an infill housing on an empty lot, right? So that's what I saw over and over again, was the complete hypocrisy. It's not just the different views of what's the impact of market rate development, right? Like, I think people can have a debate. Like, I think developers can think, hey, we're going to help by building more units here, and their AstroTurf groups can try to say that, and community groups can say, no, that's just going to gentrify. Like, there's an actual debate there, right? And you can look at how it plays out in different neighborhoods, different communities, right? But that's not what's actually going on, right? What's actually going on is this AstroTurf movement is fighting efforts to create housing for low-income people.
Well, it's crazy because the narrative is so decolonized. The narrative, that is what the narrative actually sounds like, colonial forces, and what you're trying to do is decolonize. And they're like, no, we're going to remain colonizers. We're going to you can't stop us from being colonial oppressors. We got to keep that up. And every square of San Francisco has to be colonized by us, which is like, that's dangerous. Okay, I know we only have a couple more minutes, but I do want to ask you something, because during the election, they really came at you so hard. I mean, every day there was a new nickname for you. There was so in the work that you've done after that, are you still getting that kind of harassment, or have they left you alone?
The online trolls are still active. I mean, when I was in office and even since, I could, post like, 2 + 2 is 4, and there'd be people in my comments saying how dare I, and I'm a liar, and so like those folks.
What does this do about housing?
Yeah, they're still around, and they seem oddly obsessed with me. I mean, it's always so strange when I hear from people in like other cities or something who've gotten this disinformation, and I'm just like, hey, why do they care what like a former San Francisco supervisor is doing? So I think the haters are still out there and with the same narrative, but I will say that I think there's also a lot more folks who are waking up to these kind of disinformation tactics. I think that the Phoenix Project, shows like yours and others have kind of exposed a little more that how they're manipulating people, right? And I think that seeing, one of their like patron saints like Elon Musk throwing Nazi salutes on Inauguration Day, like I think there have been some wake-up calls along the way, not for the hardcore, just most horrible purveyors of disinformation and trolls and all. They're around, and some of the leaders of the San Francisco YIMBY and GrowSF are very much part of all that. Gary Tan, all those kind of people. Yeah. But there's also a lot of people who are just like, they're in that like movement, whatever you call it, just because it's like was something, like they moved to San Francisco, they don't know much, they're offering them a thing to get into. And I think that all the really vile right-wing dystopian, just weird Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Balaji Srinivasan, like all these people who, like, I think there's more and more people who are like, holy crap, like I don't want to be part of that. Like that's who these people are.
Yeah, that's tech fascism. This tech fascism. Like you got to stop that shit at its root. Pull it out by its root. Tech fascism must go.
And I find a lot more people who, since I've left office, who kind of realize, oh, that's who was trashing you, and are much more. So I don't think it's just about me. I think it's about their days in control of San Francisco politics are numbered. They have the money, they have the control right now, but more and more people don't like what they're seeing from these folks. So we'll see how it plays out.
Well, GrowSF is already rebranded as Blueprint. I don't know if you guys have heard about that. So I mean, the same thing's true. It's the same message, the same actors. But now they're known as Blueprint SF and not GrowSF.
I'm surprised they haven't changed to Empower or whatever.
Yeah,
but that's that one again.
That's over here. That's over here.
Exactly. And if you don't mind, I have like just one more quick question because it brings up a really good point about like the YIMBYs getting it, getting their claws in upcoming politicians. But we especially we've talked too about people like Katie Porter, who you actually worked with helping like during the after the crash in 2008. You two were working together to help tenants and stuff. But now it seems like, in my opinion, that she's definitely like bought into YIMBYism. But at the same time too, you also have Joel Engardio getting recalled. Do you think YIMBY power, even though while it's still able to capture some politicians, is it fading?
Well, I think they're running into the situation where they're in control politically. And so it becomes harder to blame everyone else for the problems you're causing when you have control over most arms of government. And so we'll see how it plays out for them. But it's just easy to like rabble rouse around like, let's rezone and rezone and everything's going to be great. Okay, well, the state has rezoned, the city has rezoned, like all the upzoning has happened. It hasn't resulted in any housing.
Yep.
I mean, so it may be in other places, there may be some different markets where it's had an impact, but there's just not a lot of impact. And then you take away, Scott Wiener at the state level has been on a mission to like take away communities' opportunity to have any voice in development, right? And so when the building does start, if and when it starts, people are going to be like, oh, I actually can't even weigh in on that, right? Because they've stripped the community. So a lot of this stuff, I don't think it ages well. And I think that it's better as a for them as a talking point when it seems like you're railing against the system than when you are the system. Now, they've always been the system, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're inseparable from conservative billionaires who are funding their movement. So but it's been a lot of smoke and mirrors around that. But I think I don't see, maybe they'll come up with a new boogeyman. I don't know. Maybe it'll be the judges or the whoever. I mean, just like the right wingers, right? There's always some grievance. There's always some grievance that,
they're somehow the victim.
Yeah. So maybe they'll come up with someone else, but I think they're going to have new challenges given that they have so much political control in the city.
Awesome. Well, this was awesome, Dean. God dang, laying down the knowledge, dropping knowledge like bombs. You gotta love it, serious, man. It's so great. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, cool, so honestly, follow his blog, deanpreston.com, I believe.
Dean Preston SF.
Oh, SF. Okay. Yeah. And that'll be in our links. And also to follow him on all the socials. He's doing some great TikToks and other reels on Instagram and stuff that are always worth watching. And then do you want to talk about the event that's coming on next week?
Oh, well, I mean, it's at Makeout Room, and you got all, if you can share the details with folks, that'd be great. But yeah, it's the internet live in person and featuring a bunch of amazing folks like Kevin and others who are going to be, we'll see. We'll blur the lines between, comedy, truth, fiction, whatever else is going to happen on stage, but it should be fun and in a great venue at the Makeout Room in the Mission.
Totally. Awesome. Well, all right. Well, yeah, follow us on the socials, support our Patreon. And until next time,
keep fighting the good fight.
That's right.